Story 1. I've always struggled with pornography, not in any sort of crazy way, but usually succumbing to it once a day, which to me always felt unhealthy. Fairly early on, it stopped feeling like any sort of genuine sexual release, more like a habit that had to be fed, a routine which manufactured a sort of second wind at the midpoint of each day. I've never been a particularly kinky guy. Sure, I'll occasionally venture outside the basic categories, but generally I'm just watching a guy plus gal get down to business. I almost always skip the foreplay, straight to the action. I keep it quick, out of preference. Anyways, my problem all sort of began with a new trend I came across on my go-to site, very likely the same as yours. These fake Snapchat-style videos. I'll always remember that first thumbnail. A curvy white girl with a yellow Konkan backpack bent over her dorm room desk. College girls do anything on Snap Vol 1. Vertical videos, seemingly filmed within the Snapchat app, of some college bro recording himself banging gorgeous, typically faceless women. There'd always be some quippy Snapchat-style caption plastered over the bottom like, "Can't believe I'm fucking my teach," or "Your girl's getting quite the workout, bro." You get the idea. Despite their efforts to come off as amateur, real-life encounters, it was fairly clear they were fake. The lighting and camera quality was always too good, and some of the camera angles would clearly require an additional appendage from our protagonist. That said, in the heat of the moment, it wasn't hard to believe, and so for the next few weeks I plugged through the series. To clarify, despite my above criticisms, I really loved these videos. I'm a college dropout, so I think it allowed me to fill some imaginary void of what a sex-fueled college experience could have been like. IDK, man, it was porn, business as usual. Until Volume 9. I had just gotten home from Planet Fitness, don't make fun of me, and I was ready to unwind for the day. Took a shower, laid out on my bed, and prepared for my afternoon ritual. I'm a little bit OCD, so when I couldn't find Volume 9 of College Girls Do Anything on Snap, I was a bit irritated. It's not like there was an ongoing story or anything. I just prefer order, even in the more shameful, secret parts of my life. I returned to Volume 8 and noticed the watermark over the bottom right hand of the video. It read, snapcams.com. I punched it into my search bar and the website populated. It seemed so empty, like it wasn't complete. No search bar, no navigation menu, only a single carousel of videos in the center of the page. No thumbnails yet. It seemed to have a sluggish time loading. I sat impatiently. The suspense was killing me. Suddenly, a flurry of pop-ups and spam began to infect the landing page. I began closing them rapidly. I was starting to reconsider if this whole expedition was really worth it. However, with each pop-up closed, a little more of the carousel's newly generated thumbnails were revealed, giving me hope that I'd find what I was looking for after all. Tap, scroll, vol 1, 2, 3, 4. Tap, scroll, vol 5, 6, 7, 8. Bam, there it was. College Girls Do Anything on Snap Vol 9. I dramatically lifted my finger and tapped the video, only to come to the frustrating realization that I had to create an account to watch it. Fucking I had never had to make an account on a site like this before. I really felt like I was hitting a new low. I quickly punched in a username and password I'd never remember. I hated the idea of any kind of digital footprint on a site like this. Whatever. I'd delete the account after this video. I saw Volume 10 and on were on my typical site. This was just a one-time thing. Their terms and conditions may as well have been War and Peace. It was so long. Scroll, scroll, accept, date, birth, sign, click, done. And finally, I hit play. The video started up. A young girl, probably early 20s, beautiful, perfect skin, short, bob-cut brunette hair with glistening hazel eyes, sat on the edge of a dorm room bed, also a little thick in all the right places, my favorite. I took some relief that all this effort at least led to a winner. However, it was a bit strange that you could see her face, as that was a first for this series. Additionally, there was no Snapchat caption on this video, which I thought took away from the illusion that I came to love about this series. Oh well, I had entered my date of fucking birth to get here. I wasn't about to click off now. I began my routine as she did hers. She really was gorgeous. I tried to fantasize about situations that would put me in a position like this, how I could potentially be inside that room. Inside her. It was working. I was really falling into the trance of Vol 9. However, about 60 seconds in, to my surprise, she spoke. Just one word. Sid. Of course, it could have just been the name of the guy she was screwing. But that's also my name. At first, I welcomed the seeming coincidence. I mean, This was basically gold for my deepening fantasy. She said it again and again. I was getting close. Fast. I shut my eyes, focusing on her voice. Sid, Sid, Sid. But the next time she said it was different. Her voice was loud, like a scream crackling out of the tinny speakers on my iPhone SE. In retrospect, it was reminiscent of the scream from the scary car commercial, if anyone remembers that. So yeah, naturally I was pretty startled. My eyes shot open, expecting to see some horrifying or grotesque pop-up image, but nope, just that same beautiful woman, bouncing up and down as gracefully as she was before. Her face seemed sort of expressionless, deadpan, but she was looking directly into the camera, and that had always been a big turn-on for me. I loved to pretend I was looking right back, direct eye contact through the screen. I chalked the sound up to a glitch, or something loud outside my apartment. I tried to get started again, back into a rhythm, blurring the pixels that composed her bright green eyes. I could feel myself gradually getting closer and closer. But as I did, I couldn't help but notice the complexion of her face gradually shifting. It almost seemed like the video was lagging, as certain frames would slow down and then speed up again. But that wasn't even the strange part. During these warps in time, her face appeared to twist in ways that seemed inhuman. I assumed it was a glitch, so I just closed my eyes again. I had shit to do today and needed to just put a bow on this. I knew I was close. I could finish without the visual. Sid. My eyes forced open on impulse. If the video had been buffering, it had now slowed to a crawl. Each frame ticked onward ominously, her face slowly inching closer and closer to the camera. I remember feeling a weightlessness like I was floating. That didn't last. In no more than a second, the girl's face morphed effortlessly into a hellish flash of pure evil. That face has been burned into my fucking mind ever since. Her eyes exploded into red blurry saucers. Her mouth tore open, a circular pool of cosmic black. The video froze on this image, and without warning, a sharp, high-pitched tone rattled out of my phone into my eardrums. I was paralyzed. I dropped my phone to the ground, pulled my underwear up, and waddled to the opposite side of my bedroom. I stared at my phone from across the room, just sitting there, ringing face down on the floor until it stopped. To be as vulnerable as you are, at the edge of climaxing, and then to instantaneously freefall into the throes of absolute terror is something I would never wish upon my worst enemy. Yet there I was, heart beating out of my chest, jeans wrapped around my ankles. Also the early pains of blue balls. I decided then and there I was done with pornography. At that time, I didn't tell anyone about the incident. I chalked it up to some kind of weird prank akin to Scary Car or the Blue Maze game. It certainly wasn't the first time I'd been scared half to death by some online troll, though the gnawing feeling that it was something more sinister never fully escaped me. She said my name, and the way her face deformed, it felt beyond anything I'd ever witnessed. But I didn't want to go full schizo, so I tried to move on. That is, until I felt the urge to take care of myself again. It had admittedly been a while since I had done the deed without the aid of my incognito browser. However, I thought perhaps it was better to start using my imagination again, probably healthier for my little brain anyways. Wrong. Started out fine. My mind's spank bank is mostly comprised of sexual memories from my early, more wild ventures. One-night stands, big tits, fucking in weird places. You get the idea. So off I went, back into the mind of my 19-year-old self, reimagining and likely re-enhancing an old memory with me and an ex. We'll call her Ruby. I had forgotten how much better this was than porn. By re-accessing old memories, fully immersing yourself was simply a matter of focus and commitment to context. At 19, I had just broken up with my first girlfriend and had basically thought it impossible I would find romance again. So on that particular night with Ruby, my heart was racing. I felt rejuvenated. I can't believe this is happening, I would have thought to myself. I began to visualize her bedroom, the sheets on her mattress, and of course, her. This was fun. I could feel myself getting close now. Sid. That all too familiar shriek of my name sent shivers down my spine. My eyes tried to open like before, but this time they couldn't. It was like I was really there now in Ruby's bedroom, as if I swam so deep into the pool of my fantasy that I could no longer locate the surface. Disoriented, I looked down at my naked body. Young and frail, my ribcage protruded out from under my chest. Was I 19 again? I looked at Ruby's young, supple body, her breasts perfectly round. A newfound excitement crackled through my body like fireworks. The thick veil of nostalgia suffocated my short-term memory. The shrill scream of my name that had just shook me was ejected from my train of thought almost instantly at the thought of reliving this moment with such clarity. We proceeded. It was ecstasy. It felt like hours. Our motions were effortless and fluid, as though everything around us only existed to contextualize the magnificent act that was transpiring between our flesh. However, whenever I felt close, prickles of fear would crackle down the back of my spine. But when you're in a state of such sexual euphoria, it can be comically simple to dupe yourself, to act as though you have agency, that you know what you want. When in fact, 30 seconds later, you'll often be recounting everything you would have wished you'd done differently. I allowed myself the misguided confidence to push past my fear. But as soon as I did, so close to hearing heavenly trumpets, her face began to shift, warp. The room slowly began wrapping around me like a parachute, as though my eyes had melted away and fisheye lenses grew in their place. My stomach seized into a cluster of painful knots. I knew it was coming. One final thrust to try and finish, to escape. Too late. Her eyes expanded into bloodshot discs the size of massive dinner plates. Her mouth gaped open, revealing a bottomless hole of inky black. My body froze like a block of ice, the stabbing high tone of the frequency from hell ringing throughout the room like a siren's whine. My eyes felt like they were being pulled into hers, two black holes, completely nude, in the body of my teenage self. I surrendered utter and complete control of my mind. I tell you now, I had no choice. Her vicious whirlpool enveloped me, and for a moment, I was gone. My being suspended, thoughts flatlined, only my body can remember this moment. But like being torn from the deep waters of baptism, I felt my essence shatter up and through the surface of my own reality once again. My eyelids rose from the dead, the blurry sight of my living room revealed. Laid up on my couch, completely out of breath, I slowly began to regain my bearings. I sat up, went to the bathroom, and splashed some cold water on my face. I felt something coming up and sat down over the toilet. I waited and waited, but nothing. I gave up and sat on the bathroom floor, observing the drips leaking from the shower head. Drip, drip, drip. I became so sharply attuned to the sound. Drip, drip, drip. I didn't know it then, but I was experiencing a level of anxiety I had never experienced before. I held my hand up to my jaw to stop my teeth from chattering. Then I wept. Shortly after, my girlfriend Natasha came home. The bathroom door was wide open, so she noticed me immediately. She rushed over to console me. "Hey, what's the matter? Are you feeling all right?" What could I say? I felt imprisoned by my shame. I felt silenced by the horror. Fuck. Even now I feel ashamed that I failed to mention that I have a girlfriend until this point in my recounting of all this. Another bad habit I hope to break. I guess it's also worth noting that she suffers from dyspareunia, which makes penetration a bitch for her. It's definitely a contributing factor to my bad habits. Obviously it's not completely her fault, but you get the idea. I suck. Ugh. Anyways, I've never gone to therapy, but I began seriously considering it after what happened with Ruby. There was clearly something wrong with me, and I wasn't so confident a checkup with the doc was going to prove helpful. I have a friend, Carlos. I trust him more than anyone. We've never met in person, but we chat over Discord basically every day. I shot him a message, somewhat vaguely explaining my situation, basically saying I was having problems with anxiety while pleasuring myself. I was relieved for a moment when he told me he actually had experienced some similar problems himself, and even more when he claimed he'd overcome it. He sent me a video that he said totally changed my life, bro. NoFap activates your alpha nature. Take notes. Despite its sort of ridiculous title, the video seemed to make some interesting points regarding the benefits of semen retention. It helped me understand that not only do I have the option to stop masturbating altogether, but that it could even provide some health benefits. It seemed like the straightforward and potentially beneficial solution to my problem, so I figured I'd give it a shot. Proud to report, I haven't came in 16 months. And to be honest with you, I feel a lot better. The beginning was fucking hard, but over time the urge became less and less. Of course, I get the urge every now and then, but the fear of what could happen if I did always makes it an easy idea to turn down. Admittedly, during this time I had to block the real Ruby out of my life completely, deleted her number, blocked her on all socials, even skipped my 10-year high school reunion. I just don't think I could muster the strength to see her face again. On the flip side, my relationship with Natasha began to significantly improve. We felt closer. I even committed to learning some new methods to pleasure her that didn't involve penetration. I would argue this has actually improved our sex life, as it had always been a preference of hers that I too often ignored. So yeah, all is well, right? Sort of. Natasha and I got married 3 months ago. She wants kids, so do I. We want to see little babies with our eyes in them. And so now I come to you, reader, stricken with a growing sickness of dread, paranoia, uncertainty for my future, for our future. If during attempts to conceive our child, I had to see my wife, the mother of my future children, if I had to see her face twist into that tortuous gaze, I'm not sure how I would go on. I couldn't even bear seeing an Instagram photo of Ruby. Hell, even seeing a Konkan backup makes me shudder. Our pure, untainted love, tarnished with the mark of some hideous beast. If anyone here has any advice or questions, I'm all ears. I'm not posting here to whine into the void. I am in search of a solution. Thank you for reading. Story 2. This happened a week ago, and I still can't believe it at all. If anyone here knows anything about what happened to me, please let others know. Let me start from the beginning. I had hit the road while it was still light out with a random assortment of clothes and toiletries thrown into the back seat of my car. I just had to escape, you know. My boyfriend started drinking again, and when he gets drunk, he gets angry and starts putting holes in the drywall. I didn't want to be one of those women who stay even when things get that bad and end up dead. So when he left to get more alcohol from the liquor store around the corner, I grabbed what I could and ran. We were living in Sedona, Arizona, far from my nearest family in Oklahoma City. I didn't have much money to spare, but I figured I would have just enough for the gas to get me there. At around 6 p.m., I started the long drive home. The first few hours were uneventful. Once I got out of the city, it was miles and miles of dry desert road. I was blasting the AC and listening to the radio to keep sane. The very first thing I did when I left was turn my phone off to avoid even seeing the inevitable onslaught of calls and texts from my ex demanding I come home. I had tossed it in the back seat and tried to not think about the one tether I still had to him. The sunlight slowly dwindled away until all I was left with were my headlights and a sky full of stars. I didn't want to turn my brights on to blind any drivers coming the other way, even though the new moon wasn't providing any light, which is probably why I didn't see the whatever it was before I ran right into it. I had a split second to notice something had run into my path before I felt a sickening thud against the hood of my car. I screamed and hit the brakes, throwing everything in my back seat onto the floor. It got sent flying and rolled to a stop several yards away, just out of the range of my headlights. I could vaguely make out a lumpy shape, like a person wearing a big robe or blanket or something. The only thing I could hear for the first few seconds was the sound of my own heavy breathing. Fuck was the only thing I could think. I just killed somebody, I thought, and then immediately tried to rationalize a way out of that thought. It's probably a coyote. No, too big. A mountain lion then. Still bad, but it made more sense and gave me more peace than the idea that I hit a lone hitchhiker out in the middle of nowhere. All these thoughts occurred in the span of a few seconds before I realized I could turn my brights on to get a better look at it. I braced myself before flicking them on, and the white light briefly blurred my vision before my eyes settled on the figure I had hit. It was big and splayed out on the asphalt, its body contorted and broken. I could make out leaking blood coming from somewhere, pooling on the road ahead of me, and guts. The force of the impact or the skidding across the road must have torn open its stomach. What it was, I still couldn't say. Its head was hidden behind its large form, at least half the size of my sedan, and I could make out what looked like black fur covering most of its body and a tail that snaked out beyond the light from my headlights. It was also long-limbed, and the one appendage I could make out with any clarity ended in a skinny paw tipped with long, jagged claws. My realization that it was not a human being I had just killed wasn't as relieving as it should have been. The fact that I couldn't make out what the hell this thing was freaked me out almost more than the impact had, and I nearly lost my lunch right then. The blinking warning signs on my dashboard tore my eyes away from its splayed guts and back to the reality that my car was probably just as fucked as the creature. My foot was still mashing the brakes into the floor, so I put the car into park and eased off, removing my shaking hands from the wheel as well. I also dimly realized that I was bleeding from smashing my nose against the wheel, but the hurt was a dull ache thanks to the rush of adrenaline and anxiety. I had little hope that my phone would have any cell service out here, but I figured I should try. If it failed, I'd have to drive my car off the road and across the cracked desert ground to get past its body, since it was blocking most of the two-lane road. Something in me didn't want to take my eyes off of the thing, but my phone had surely fallen onto the floor during the crash. I tried blindly pawing for it to no avail, so I unbuckled my seatbelt and turned to sift through my junk to find it. I felt a slight lurch in the car as my hand made contact with the phone and whipped my head back around to see that the thing was closer, by at least a few yards, now well within the range of my regular headlights, still in the same mangled position, though now I could see it more clearly. What I thought was fur was just mottled grey-black skin, and what I thought was a tail was actually one of its arms? Legs? It was too bent and mangled to tell. My car lurched again and I slammed on the brakes, but couldn't figure out how I moved that close without noticing. I wasn't looking away long enough for the movement to be gradual enough not to notice. Oh God, was it alive? Had it moved, somehow crawling forward while remaining in the same broken pose? My hands shook even more as I attempted to dial 911 3 times, not daring to take my eyes off of the thing. To my surprise and relief, the line actually started ringing, and an operator picked up soon after. 911, what's your emergency? A man's crackling voice rang out. I'm out on the road like an hour or two from the last gas station, and I can't remember the last town I passed. But I just hit a big animal that's blocking the road ahead, and I'm not sure if my car will be able to go off-road to pass it. Ma'am, are you injured or is your car smoking? I'm bleeding from my nose hitting the wheel, but it's fine, I said, not wanting my injury to slow down a response. I figured paramedics would take longer to get here. My car isn't smoking, but the check engine light is on, and I think there's a problem with the brakes. I thought of the car lurching closer to the creature, how I didn't even notice how close I got. Okay, ma'am, we're getting your location on GPS and sending an officer out to help you. The line went static for a brief, terrifying moment, but returned quickly and thankfully became clearer. And can you tell me what animal you hit? And can you confirm that it's dead? Unfortunately, the question shook me out of my relief because I couldn't confidently answer either one. I think it's a bear, but it has a tail, I think, and its limbs are too long, and I can see its guts, so I'm pretty sure it's dead, yeah. Regardless, I answered with my best guess, knowing I could be wrong about both. Are you able to step outside of your vehicle and make sure? The man said. What? Why? I asked, thoroughly confused. Why would he ask me to do that? And why was I so resistant to the idea? It was a dead animal. I'd seen and hit my share of roadkill before. This was definitely the biggest, though, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't all that dead yet. I'd rather stay in my car, if that's all right. It would just help the responding officer understand the situation better and how best to help you. Was he being weirdly insistent, or was I being obtuse? I couldn't tell. Oh, okay, just give me a minute. In a daze, I put my hand on the car handle and began to slowly open it. That's when I heard something underneath my car. A quiet, slow, scratching sound, like something weakly pawing at the undercarriage. I froze with my hand on the handle just before I was about to unlock the door. Stretching out from the darkness was a long, skinny appendage coming from the same side of the road that the creature's long leg went into. With my face pressed to the window, I could make out enough of the limb to know that it must have ended right underneath my car. It pulled me closer. The thought became unshakable. No other more reasonable explanation fit in my head. It pulled me closer while I wasn't looking. Is everything all right? Were you able to step outside your vehicle to check on the creature? No, I think it's best if I stay inside my car. It's dark out there. I found myself unwilling to tell the truth about what I saw, for fear that he wouldn't believe me. I could hardly believe what I was seeing, and I was the one that hit the damn thing. Are you sure? There will be a delay in response time if you cannot tell us the nature of the creature. I will ask you once again to step outside of your vehicle. He was definitely insistent that time, but there was no way in hell I was leaving this car. I triple-checked that the door was locked and said, I am worried that the animal is still alive and might react if I open the door and step outside. Terse, but I figured I'd save him the time in trying to convince me. The thought of waiting here with this thing any longer than I had to was terrifying, but it was better than doing what the voice on the phone was telling me to. Okay, see you soon. Click. The abrupt end of the call startled me, and the following silence was deafening. I kicked myself for not mentioning the limb, but every call I tried after that failed to go through. I turned my key halfway to turn the engine off, but kept the lights on. I figured I'd still need the car to be able to move after this ordeal was over, and probably couldn't expect a tow truck at this time of night. I barely blinked for the next hour, staring at the creature before me, watching its blood continue to leak out and its guts sag in the cool desert air. They looked weird. I guess I'd never seen a living thing's insides before this close, but they were so brightly colored, and my headlights were reflecting off of something shiny in the middle of the viscera. I kept one eye on the limb that was underneath my car. It never moved an inch, but the soft, nearly inaudible scratching filled my ears during the wait in the deafening silence. Now that my engine was off, it was painfully audible. I glanced at my phone a few times to check the time. 3:45 a.m., 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m., until finally I saw lights in my rearview mirror. I scrambled to turn the lights on in my car so he could see me inside, and as the car came to a stop a few yards behind mine, I held up my hands in a wait gesture and pointed to the ground beside my door as best I could, hoping he would see it clearly in the light of his headlights. However, when I looked at it myself, the limb was gone. The officer either didn't interpret my hand signs or didn't care. He stepped out of his car and began to walk across the road to me. I noticed that he turned his car off, but left the lights on and his hazards up, and it struck me that no other cars had driven down this road the entire time I've sat here, waiting. A blessing in disguise, I thought to myself, that no one else had to deal with what happened next. When he was halfway between his car and mine, the limb snaked out from the darkness and a clawed hand latched onto his leg, and even through my closed doors I heard a sickening crack as his bone shattered under its grip. He barely had time to scream in pain before the hand whipped him into the darkness. The shock and horror froze me for a few seconds as I desperately tried to search the darkness for any sign of him before realizing I hadn't looked at the creature in too long. I tore my eyes from the darkness and looked ahead of me. It was standing now, its guts still hanging from its torn open stomach. The thing was at least 3 times the height of my car, covered in its own blood and viscera. Its face was out of view, far over the height of my lights and the roof of my car. And now I could see that it wasn't big like a bear, but instead coiled around on itself, like a human stretched out with its arms and legs and torso all at different lengths. Its arm was what had snatched the officer away, and I heard a loud squelch as it began to almost reel it into its body. The officer came back into view quickly as the monster raised him up by his crushed leg. The officer was screaming in pain, and all I could do was watch in horror as he was raised 10 feet off the ground and towards this thing's face. Somehow the officer still had some of his bearings, because he had managed to unholster his gun. He unloaded into the monster's chest, the shots ringing out across the barren desert. In response, the thing threw the officer against the ground hard and let out an unholy screech, louder than the gunfire, louder than anything I've ever heard. It was almost like an inhale, sucking in all other sound until the only thing reverberating off of the distant mountains was a dull, inverted roar that crackled at the edges like static. No, that was my radio, crackling to life somehow and reverberating this thing's scream. The whole thing transpired in under a minute, and I don't think I stopped screaming until just then, when I saw the cop's body flung like a rag doll onto the side of the road, a lane away from my car. His leg was definitely broken, and he might have been knocked unconscious by the throw. I only spared him a glance, but when I looked back at the monster, it was turning away and retreating from the light of my brights, long limbs clutching its bleeding chest and holding its hanging guts. Seconds that felt like hours passed as I sat there paralyzed, staring at the darkness and willing this nightmare to be over. I hoped to God that it was gone, bleeding and dying and deciding I wasn't worth the trouble. That thought reminded me of the man who I hadn't even looked at yet, who might still be alive. He was still crumpled against the asphalt, face down, arm bent at a weird angle, leg absolutely mangled. I couldn't just leave him there, but stepping outside meant risking that thing coming back for me. I decided to crack my window and try to get the officer's attention. "Officer," I whisper yelled, "are you okay? Are you still alive?" A brief moment passed with no response, and then I heard a labored grunt and saw him move. I felt awash with a mixture of relief that he was alive, and a feeling that if he wasn't, I could have justified starting my car and leaving him there. Not a feeling I'm proud of, but I shook it quickly and said, "Can you get inside? That thing, I think it's gone." Another grunt, and then I heard his voice barely above a whisper say, Don't leave your car. I think I can... Fuck. My leg's fucked. Just unlock your car. I'll crawl as fast as I can inside, and then we have to go." Okay, I'll unlock it when you get close." I was still unwilling to take any risks. The officer rose to one hand and one knee, the other leg dragging behind him and the other arm hanging limply. Slowly, Painfully, he made his way across the road to me. While he did that, I turned my key over and over, the engine spluttering and dying each time while I kept my head on a swivel, watching everywhere for the monster to come back. When he was only a few feet away, I saw something at the edge of the light cast by the cop car. The hand was back, and it wasn't moving. He was nearly to my car door, and it was there, waiting. That's the only explanation. It could see us right now, and it was waiting for me to open my door to him. My car wouldn't start anyway. We would both be dead in the water if I let him in, but his car still worked. There's no way he could make it back there, not with how long it took him to even crawl across the road to mine. With my window still cracked, I whispered, "Do you still have your car keys? Mine isn't starting." "Yeah, they're still in my pocket, but I don't know if I can get over there. Just let me in before that thing comes back." I looked back at the clawed hand, tensed and ready to pounce. I looked at the overwhelming darkness just beyond my brights, knowing that it was there, watching. "Officer, it's already back. Behind you, its arm is there. I think it's waiting for me to open the door for you." I couldn't lie to him, but maybe he'd understand. "I need you to get your car keys out and toss them to me. I can make a break for it and drive back to town and get help." "It isn't attacking you. Maybe it's afraid of the gun. Please, I need to get out of here." My pleas came out in a desperate tumble. Looking back, I was practically begging him for permission to leave him here to die. He stopped crawling. Wordlessly, he slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out the car keys. Then he reloaded his gun, painfully slow with only one good hand, and positioned his flashlight on the ground facing towards the hand. "I'm going to toss these on the ground in front of your door," he said. "Then I'm going to turn round and fire at it. That'll give you a chance to get to my car and drive away whichever direction is safest." He spoke like a man digging his own grave. "Thank you, God, thank you. I'll call for help as soon as I'm clear." It felt like I was the one killing him, even as I thanked him. "On three, 1, 2, 3, he shouted, and everything happened at once. He tossed the keys, turned the flashlight on, and turned to fire 2 shots at the hand. The first one struck the asphalt, but the second one found its target. 2 of its fingers were blown off, and it recoiled back in pain as I heard its rumbling screech begin to sound once more. Despite the volume, I could tell it was close. I didn't have a choice, though. I leapt out of my car and snatched the keys, and made a break for the cop car only a few yards behind me. The monster's scream was suddenly joined by the officers, and 3 more shots rang out by the time I reached the car. I opened the door and jammed the keys into the ignition, and chanced one last look at what was happening ahead. The monster's other hand had speared through the officer's chest and was smashing him into the ground over and over, reducing his body to a wet pulp. In the headlights, I caught the briefest glimpse of its face for the first time. God! It looked like someone had carved a dozen holes into black rubber and jammed eyes and teeth in at random. Part of it was scraped off, probably from the impact, and I could see more blood and muscle giving way to whatever was underneath. It didn't seem like bone. It was so reflective in the light that it nearly caught me off guard. It was looking at me, tilting its head like I was something curious. It raised its injured hand and held it up to me, and I could see the bleeding stumps where 2 of its clawed fingers once had something stringy that I now believe were wires coming out of them. The monster waved at me, and its hand shot out like a cannon, cracking the windshield with the impact. I threw the car into reverse and slammed on the gas, outspeeding it before the claw could get a grip on anything substantial. It tossed the officer aside like a rag and looked at me as I sped away backwards. Mercifully, it did not follow, and the light reflecting off its exposed skull was the last thing I could see in the distance before I turned the car around and continued as fast as I could towards town. With trembling hands, I dialed 911 once more. The officer was dead, no doubt about that, but I thought maybe they could block the road off. Warn people, something. The call went through right away, didn't even ring. Crystal clear, the same voice from earlier rang out. 911, what's your emergency? I called a while ago and you sent an officer out about me hitting an animal with my car. I didn't even know what to say. Would he believe me if I told the whole truth? I continued. The officer you sent, he got injured by the animal, and he told me to drive back without him in his car. Fuck, even I didn't believe myself. Did you get away? How far away are you from the animal? If the officer is injured, you need to go back for him and get out of your car, said the voice. No, what? I said, thoroughly confused. I'm not going back there, it's dangerous. Then his blood is on your hands. Stop your car and step out of your vehicle so we can place you under arrest. My blood ran cold. Why would he say that? What good would that do? I had begun to realize that something was not right about the times I'd called for help. Why would you say that? Why do you want me to get out of my car? My voice was hard, and I kept my grip steady on the wheel and pressed on the gas even harder. You need to get out of your car, he said, his voice growing both more insistent and more robotic. Get out of your car! 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 Get out of... I hung up and threw my phone into the back seat once more. I didn't have a moment's peace before the cop car's mobile radio turned on and kept repeating the same words. I tried to turn it off, but only found the transponder. This wasn't the police, it couldn't have been. I thought back to its screech causing my own radio to freak out, the metallic sheen of its insides, the wires. I clicked the transponder on and said, I'm not getting out for you. I know it's you, not the cops. Get out of the radio and leave me the fuck alone. My voice was trembling, but it got the voice to pause its repetitions. For a moment, static silence filled the car. See you on your way back then? Click. The lights went off on the radio, and all the communication devices stayed off for the rest of my drive back to town. The sun began to rise, but I didn't risk stopping until all darkness was gone from the desert. I ditched the car on the side of the road not far from town and hitchhiked the rest of the way back. I eventually got back to civilization and begged my family to scrounge up enough money to book a flight home. God knows I won't ever make that drive again across that desert, or any driving through the night for probably the rest of my life. That officer died for me, and I left him there and didn't even tell anyone what had happened, so I'm writing this now to warn people. If you ever find yourself crossing the desert past dark, drive slow and keep your eyes peeled. You never know what's out there just beyond the reach of your lights. Story 3. I have worked as a conservation officer for the Department of Natural Resources for 15 years. Last week was my last. I don't even care that I was only a few years from receiving my piddly-ass pension from the state. I don't care if I have to spend the rest of my life picking gum and chewed up tobacco out of urinals at the truck stop. I am done. Being a game warden for 15 years will get you used to seeing some pretty nasty stuff. Animal entrails become as standard to you as $20 bills to a bank teller. And just like a bank teller, no matter how many you handle, you don't get paid anymore. If that were the case, I wouldn't have so many stains in my truck from gas station pizza. Much of your time will be spent dragging bloated roadkill out from the middle of the road. I've seen deer so distended that they will crack and split like an old basketball you left outside too much as a kid. This year I was able to switch assignments and therefore areas. I don't know if it's because of my years of dedication and hard work or just because my boss has looked at me like a charity case ever since my sister drowned 5 years ago. I don't care, it keeps him off my back. Also, this area doesn't have a highway cutting through the middle of it, so that means roadkill is at a minimum. A few months in, and I was really enjoying the freedom that the remoteness has given me. I rarely see any other wardens, so I can be a little more lax on the requirements and duties. My signal here is always spotty, so if I want to slack off a little and get lunch, I can just mute my radio and blame it on a bad connection. Then, I am free to head to the diner a few miles up the street and chow down. The owner knows I am not supposed to do that, but she doesn't care. Hell, half the time I go there I see high schoolers smoking butts out of the ashtray or bumming cigarettes. It scared the shit out of them to see me pull up until they started to recognize I'm not a state trooper. Now when I go, they try to bum cigs off of me. I would tell them that I had quit and they would do their best to forget that next time they saw me. Part of the area I managed was a place called Blackstone Quarry. It was an old quarry for many years and provided the town with the majority of its income. Eventually the owner, Mr. Blackstone, started to ignore the geologists in the pursuit of lining his pockets. And guess what? They hit water. A lot of water. Flooded the whole bottom of the quarry. Fearing potential litigation, Mr. Blackstone so generously decided to donate all of the land to the government for a cheap price. They were forming a plan for a hydroelectric dam, and the quarry's placement made for a good inundation zone. That way, if the dam were to malfunction, the overflow would only fill the quarry more. It malfunctioned. The flood was for the most part contained. A few people, including a game warden, were swept away, but it was nothing a few greased palms couldn't cover up. Most families like mine just got a very sincere apology. They could have at least paid for the flowers, let alone the $1,000 tombstone I had to inscribe her name on. All manner of new opportunities opened up. Countless creatures from the lake flooded into the quarry, and a new job as warden opened up. On the bright side, The town had a brand new scenic fishing spot, and I had a new job. Seeing the water did sometimes send a chill down my spine, but I only really had to go there in the winter when it was all frozen. And hey, maybe in some ironic twist, I could save another family from the same water that broke mine apart. On the third month, I found the first body. Winter had started to set in, and someone had decided their need for a cold fish outweighed the need to read the warning signs of thin ice over a spring. They cracked right through into the center of the lake. They must have been an out-of-towner, because no one had noticed that they had been down there for days. They had eventually washed to the surface when the ice waned after a streak of unusual warmer January days. The fish did a number on them. The body was frayed and shredded like a moth-chewed sweater. The most unusual detail was a circular puncture wound in what remained of the neck. As I stood there, the scent of decay, our decay, the decay of my fellow human being, saturated the air in my nose and mouth. I could feel the liquid burn of vomit slithering and twisting its way from my stomach and up my throat like a serpent. My mouth coated itself with frantic saliva. It's strange, you know. I've seen so many dead animals that I rarely even feel anything anymore, and yet, even though barely enough remained to tell me I was looking at a human, I could feel my body rejecting what lay before me. Some ancient, forgotten voice in my mind would do nothing but just softly cry one word: run. It took smoking a whole pack of menthols in the gas station parking lot just to flush the stench of that air, the taste of that air, out of the back of my throat. I tried to quit that day. My boss, Jeff, sat me down and tried to rationalize that this can happen and that my job was so important I mustn't abandon it. I knew it was all bullshit. He just couldn't get anyone else to fill the position. I had told him that I wanted to help protect people and prevent what happened to Laura when I started the new assignment. He said that staying at this job is what Laura would have wanted. I hated it when he said her name. The word curdled in his acrid, tobacco-stuffed mouth like expired cream. I hated that I knew how that word would sound when he added "I love you" before it. I hated him. He hated me. I knew it. He knew it. But unfortunately, he was right. Laura would be proud of me for doing what I'm doing. I was honoring her memory. So, I went back to work, keeping a close eye on those who returned when the lake finally refroze, while keeping myself as far away from the water as possible. I would always keep an eye out, especially before sunset, to make sure no one was fishing after dark. When the time would come, people would side-eye me and my government plates and reluctantly pack up their saws and rods and head back home. I began to relax a little. The quarry was beautiful, almost hauntingly so. It had a hypnotizing natural beauty despite its unnatural creation. I had heard very few things about that incident since. The body was matched up with a missing person report put out in the next town over. The rest of what I heard was just paranoid theories from the town drunks. It's funny how everyone's source is always they. They said that the coroners had to resort to dental identification. They said that the government had swept in and took the body away. They say that the government let a bunch of chemicals leach from that research lab nearby, and that's why the ice was so thin, and the snapping turtles get so big and so mean, and probably why they haven't had a steady job or relationship in 20 years. They sure knows a lot. Maybe someday one of these wise alcoholics will let me meet their buddy they, so I can ask them why his friends won't shut the hell up. It was one night I was sitting by the quarry monitoring the fishers. It was a windy day, so not many anglers. Most everybody had left hours ago. I decided to pack it up myself a bit early. They wouldn't know. I would turn off my radio and leave it in the truck. Lie that I called in at the end of my shift, but the signal had gotten lost in the valley. Then I would take a cursory look around and see if anyone remained on the ice and go home. As I walked around looking for any remaining fishers, I heard something. A woman was screaming, calling out for help. I had felt that same feeling when I saw that corpse. I heard that same ancient voice in my memory saying that same word, run. But the word felt different. I did need to run, but I needed to run towards it, to save this person from the same fate that fell upon my sister. So I did. I ran, ignoring the cold wind stinging my ears and burning my lungs. I ran as the screaming got louder and louder, and the wind swirled the sound around my ears, twisting around me like rope. I ran. Saplings whipped my face and brush seized my feet, commanding me to stay in place. When I reached the shoreline, I looked out into the water. It was almost completely dark by then. With my flashlight, I probed the ice's surface. I spotted a large break in the ice about 20 yards out. I ran as fast as I could, ignoring any safety measures. I looked into the water, but I heard nothing. I saw nothing. There was no discarded fishing gear, no disruption of the snow to show someone had tried to clamber out of the water, just a clean break in the ice. The ice was thick, almost a foot, more than enough to support even the heaviest of fishermen. I fell to my knees. My radio, my fucking radio. How stupid am I? It was nowhere on my belt. I sprinted back to my truck, turned on my radio and, ringing every last whisper of air left in my lungs, called for assistance. Help arrived and scanned, scoured, did everything short of dredging the reservoir. Yet they found nothing. No bodies were reported. No vehicles were found in any of the parking areas or on the sides of the access roads. Nothing. Days passed. No missing person report was ever filed in any of the nearby towns. I still had no idea where that sound came from, where that break came from. Weeks passed, the fishing increased, and so did my intake of nicotine. Public curiosity faded, and I started to feel like one of the guys that believes what they had to say. I started listening intently to rumors I had previously dismissed. I would pore through any records I could find that even mentioned the quarry or of the government building nearby. Anything about deaths or disappearances before I started working here? Nothing. I could barely even find anything about the deaths in the flood. Just a few sparse obituaries in the newspapers. Another slow day of fishing passed, overcast and windy. The sunset did not even try to break the blockade of clouds it faced. It was now late February, and while still breezy, the wind didn't sound so murderous. I shuddered when I got out of my vehicle to make the rounds. The air felt like it did when I heard that scream. If I let my mind unfocus, the wind itself almost whispered to me about it, but I tried to stay focused. I turned as much away from the quarry as I could while still looking at it, and failed to light another cigarette. I condemned myself for always impulse buying those cheap lighters at the gas station. Defeated, I stuffed the lighter back in my pocket. I thought to myself maybe I could get a little buzz if I just chewed on it for a while. I went to walk my rounds and tell everyone to wrap it up and head to shore. The few remaining anglers gathered their things, and whatever creatures they ripped from the depths, and went to search for their vehicles in the fading sunlight. I heard it again, that same scream for help. I looked around to see if anyone else had heard, but everyone else had gotten into their vehicles and left already. I rushed out, flashlight and radio ready. I spotted a break in the ice. Far out into the lake, someone was thrashing wildly in the water. They were screaming. The closer I drew to them, the less the scream sounded like words, and the harsher and grittier it grew in my ears. Again that ancient word entered my head, clawing its way to the front of my attention. This time it was only said once. "Run!" It echoed in my skull like a shattered wineglass. The feeling made me want to run away, not to run forward and save them. What is wrong with me? I needed to save this woman. I choked it down and ran closer. I could see her distant silhouette thrashing wildly, desperately trying to grasp at anything that she could hold on to. I hastened my pace, the adrenaline and my own cold, leaking eyes blurring my vision. As I dived forward to grab her outstretched arm, my flashlight and radio clattered onto the ice. In the dark, I felt around for her arm. It was bare, slick and cold from the water. I pulled it as hard as I could, trying to free her. She tried to pull herself up from the ice, but she was heavy, resilient even. Her grip tightened. I felt a sting in my hands where she had grasped me. My feet edged closer to the water. She wasn't pulling herself from the ice, she was pulling me under it. I then realized her screaming had ceased. I strained my eyes to see her arm was black and shiny, and it was long, far too long. As I lay on my back trying to pull away, I realized that it stretched the entire length of my body. Its hand flattened and stretched out, wrapping its glistening, barbed edges around my hands. It now completely encompassed both of my hands down to my wrist. I could feel sharp jabs, almost like needles digging into the skin on my hands, tearing my flesh. Then I smelled it, that familiar odor that had invaded my senses and permeated my very skin. That odor that I had smelled when I discovered that corpse on the shore. That ancient word from that ancient voice grew from a vestigial echo into the only thing that I could hear. As my body was slowly dragged into the water, the suggestion of a face crested over the edge of the ice, lit cautiously by the discarded electric light. As the visage breached, I could see that large lacerations seemed to separate the face into quarters. I saw as the quarters separated and a thick barbed tentacle squirmed from between them. The face continued to peel back and bloom like a grotesque lily. The appendage rose overhead, twitching like a hound scenting the air, then struck towards me. I threw myself to the side as the probe plunged deep into the ice next to me, but my effort was not enough as one of the barbs sliced my cheek deeply. My molars felt cool air as my cheeks split, forcibly lengthening my grimace. This cold sensation was quickly resolved by the searing heat of pain like no other. As the tentacle tried to wrench itself from the ice, I took the opportunity to free myself. I ripped my right hand free, and the grasping hooks of the creature rended my skin. Pain roared through my arm as my face felt the warm spray of my own blood. I reached for the pistol on my hip, trying to thumb the latch of my holster with my parody of a hand, making everything it touched slick and glossy. With great effort, I cleared the barrel from its holster and pointed it at the water. Bullets ripped into the ice and water, the pistol's harsh report whelming my own cries of pain, anger, and primordial violence. I felt my left hand quickly slip free from its cutting bonds as the writhing dark mass of flesh reeled and slumped back into the water. I clawed my way back onto the ice and attempted to stand. No use. It was dark now, very dark. My ears were ringing and mucus heaved from my mouth and nose, forming a sea foam froth at the corners of my newly widened mouth. I pulled my way back toward the shore and my truck, holding the flashlight in my teeth so I did not miss it. I could hear the ice lazily creaking as if waking up from a long sleep. Thump! I hastened my crawl. Thump! The slamming sent tremors through the stubborn ice beneath me. Very faintly, I swear I could hear a woman screaming. It sounded muffled. Softly, it resonated through the ice. Then again, thump! By the third thump, I had reached the edge of the quarry. It seemed to stop, but I could not be sure. I clambered into my vehicle and started the engine. I stripped the cold, wet clothes off my near-hypothermic body. I turned the heat all the way up and twisted the radio volume knob so hard it snapped off in my hand, the harsh static cooing to me like a mother to her child. There I laid, curled up until the blackness at the edge of my vision slowly encompassed everything. I was told that some workers from the hydroelectric plant found me in my vehicle the next morning in a state of prolonged shock, the car battery drained and the gas tank dry. Blood and a viscous black liquid covered much of the upholstery and side panel of the vehicle. They did not say much about the nature of the wounds. They tried to convince me I must have taken a tumble off of one of the cliffs by the shore and got cut up by briars and rocks before falling through the ice. I did not try to fight them on the matter. I knew nothing I could say about it would be believed. They had already looked at me differently ever since I had reported the screaming. I had asked if they had searched, and they told me that the workers from the plant were unable to find any evidence of foul play, that my blood and fingerprints were the only thing found in the area, and the ice had already begun to refreeze by the time they had arrived, and that there was no reason to delve further. They were even kind enough to send flowers to my hospital room. Story 4. I've been doing this for over 12 years, and until this morning, I thought I'd pretty much seen anything and everything that could scare a man. I guess I was wrong, and I think I need help. I deal with hauntings and infestations of the unnatural kind, not ghosts. Exactly. Not sure I believe in those, to be honest, but I am open to be proven wrong. No, my line of work regards more straightforward things, the type that grows teeth if enough people in the same place believe in them hard enough. Belief can make the strangest things come crawling out of the dark. More before, of course, when entire towns could be praying to the wrong saint, or leaving offerings to what they thought were the local tomte by their doorstep. Naive men falling for the huldra, losing their souls in the process. Things like that don't happen anymore, not as often, not even when I started this line of work. Occurrences have shifted with a more complicated humanity, are less defined, more mixed and shaped and diverse, I guess, for better, in that there are less sightings overall, but for worse in that it's very hard to banish something you don't know much about. These days, most of the things I have dealt with personally don't really have names or well-defined categories. Most are a blur of half-forgotten stories stitched together with urban myths and personal beliefs. We all have our own, well, ghosts. Where the stitches of belief meet are where disaster brews. My last job sounded simple, not completely unknown, which was refreshing. One of those empty house, strange noises, weird shadows type calls. Extra points for being in a farmhouse just a short drive from the city I live in. Typical of its position, with a long and bumpy gravel road snaking its way through the fields, a small lake shadowed behind it and choked with reeds. I've been to a dozen just like it. Whatever family had lived there before had left everything. Furniture, old toys, clothes still folded in the drawers, a small, colourful pot still sitting on the broken stove. I don't know for how long the house had been empty, but it was obvious the city's teenagers had found their way there by the empty cans strewn about, the freshly broken windows. On the side of the door, someone had painted a crude face with 3 eyes and its mouth sewn shut in stark red and black. Below it, in what was probably just black marker, names in different handwriting below a headline, "Challenge the Lady of Death." Crap. That was probably what did it, and as most of us know, probably all it would take to start something sinister. A made-up name, a dare of some kind, stories told in the dark. By themselves, each thing wouldn't be enough to cause any issues. But again, belief is the contagion of creation. If the story stays consistent enough and enough people enforce it through belief and fear, it can tether. They must have told the story 100 different ways until it caught on. How she lived in the lake, how you could hear her through the drains, how she'd mark you if you spoke her name at midnight. This place could have been fed for weeks or months before I arrived. The tether wouldn't be overly strong, but it could be there. That was enough. The front door was stuck when I tried it, the wooden frame warped from the damp that had made its way inside through the broken windows. When it gave out, it made a simultaneously wet and dry sound, like tearing bark from a tree. A few snails clung to the inside of the frame, pale and glistening, their colourful shells made grey and brown by the light. I stepped over them. The air inside was cold and slick, smelt faintly of moss and earth and mould. Every wall was covered in small droplets of condensation. Between food wrappers and broken wood, scattered shells. Hundreds of them covered the warped floor, cracked faintly beneath my feet as I made my way through. I told myself that they had made their way in through the windows, came up from the lake. At the time, it didn't matter that the nearest waterline was almost 50 meters downhill. I did the usual sweep, room by room, slow, careful, meticulous, tried to feel. Nothing was out of place except the smell, and sure, abandoned houses in the middle of nowhere wouldn't necessarily smell like anything different than mold and wet, but it was very strong. Earthy smells tend to be succinct, delicate maybe, barely there. This was overpowering, but not necessarily in an unpleasant way. It didn't smell like rot or ash, as would be expected if the tether was strong, just earthy, damp. The living room was the only place not covered in garbage and graffiti. Arguably, it was relatively untouched. Someone had rolled up the carpet, put it neatly in a corner, moved the striped couch out of the way, kept the space empty. There were no shells on the floor. Instead, a bowl similar to the pot in the kitchen, the same retro pattern adorned its sides. It was filled with water, gone cloudy and thick. A handful of snail shells of different colors floated on the surface, spinning lazily even though the air was still. You tend to develop a really strong gut feeling for the tethers, but I felt nothing still. So I did the bare minimum. I whispered the binding, poured salt on all thresholds, and hung an iron horseshoe atop the front door. I scratched the names away from the wall, but left the painting and headline. Too much work. I opened the door to leave, and that's when I heard it. The softest scraping from an adjacent room, slow, steady, like something was dragging itself towards me. I stopped mid-movement, tensed. My heartbeat was suddenly audible in my ears, but by then it was the only thing I heard. Thump, thump, thump. Nothing else. I stayed like that for at least 30 seconds. Then I left. I finished the job, sent my handler a progress message with a weak tether and recommendation to recheck in a few weeks, then got in my car. I made it home before dark had settled, had dinner, watched some TV. Normal shit you do in the evening. I still felt nothing. Then, as I was getting ready to go to bed, I heard it again, the dragging, from the bathroom. I froze, and for a moment I could swear I felt it. The tether. A warm, almost hot one, with a smell of wet moss and decay. The hair on my arm stood on end, and from the bathroom something scraped again. Lucky that I froze right in my hallway. I reached for the iron nail I keep on the table next to my keys and slowly made my way toward the bathroom. I don't know what I was thinking exactly, but I just threw the door open. The light was off. I reached for the switch and stopped right in my tracks. The sink was half full of water, opaque and faintly green. Dozens of snails clung to the porcelain. Heads poked out as they made their way round and round. I swear I could see the trails around the rim. The water had a soft ripple to it, even though nothing touched it. I took a step back. My breath felt warm. The smell hit me then. Wet moss, damp, mold, something sweet rotting underneath. A larger ripple on this water. then a soft sound as the plug broke and the water started going down at speed, as if something was inhaling through the pipes. I dropped the nail. The time I turned the light on again, the sink was empty of water. The snails remained, though, moving their slimy bodies around the rim, around and around. I stood there for a long time watching them, trying to feel. The tether wasn't as strong then, but it felt off somehow. I don't know how to explain it, as if it was missing an anchor. So, here I am, pretty sure I fucked up somehow. I have no idea how, though. That's why I'm writing here. It's not like we go for after-work mixers or have annual meetups, but surely there must be more of us out there. Everything still smells like moss in here, and there's another fucking snail on my welcome mat. I live on the 5th floor. Hopefully someone who has any idea what the fuck is going on will read this, even if you're not a banisher. I have tried looking in the handbook and online and found nothing, and I don't know where to begin. If you know anything about weird tethers, please help.